The story of Michael Jordan's so-called flu game, which took place during Game 5 of the 1997 NBA Final, is one of the most iconic chapters in the career of the greatest basketball star of all time. Although the widely circulated account says Jordan played while suffering from the flu, some claim he was actually dealing with food poisoning. Regardless of the true cause, his performance that night remains an extraordinary testament to perseverance and willpower. It became a symbol that transcends sport, ranking among the most memorable moments not only in the NBA but in basketball history as a whole. To understand why the flu game reached such legendary status, it's important to revisit the Chicago Bulls situation at the time. In 1997, the Bulls were at the height of a golden era. Led by coach Phil Jackson, they had already clinched 3 consecutive championships in the early 90s, 1991, 1992, and 1993, before Jordan briefly retired for almost 2 years, returning in 1995 to finish out the season. After his return, the team reclaimed its dominance, winning the 1996 title with a then-record 72-10 regular season mark. Jordan, 33 years old at the time, was still the undisputed leader, alongside key players like Scottie Pippen, his longtime right-hand man, and Dennis Rodman, the defensive and rebounding specialist, who added extra spice to their roster. Their 1997 Finals opponent, the Utah Jazz, was no pushover. Coached by Jerry Sloan, a former Bulls player from the 1970s, the Jazz boasted a legendary duo: John Stockton, a point guard with pinpoint passing and a brilliant basketball IQ, and Karl Malone, a powerful forward well known for dominating the paint and knocking down mid-range shots. This was the Jazz's first ever appearance in the NBA Final, but it had been years in the making, as they consistently performed at a high level every season. There was significant buzz around the match because, unlike many of the Bulls' previous challengers, this Jazz team demonstrated a cohesive, fluid style of play, boasting both an experienced and talented roster. Fans and analysts began to wonder if Utah might finally be the team to dethrone Chicago. The series was tightly contested. Chicago won the first 2 games at home, but Utah took the next 2 in Salt Lake City, tying the finals at 2-2. Thus, Game 5 became a pivotal showdown. The winner would head into the next game needing just one more victory for the title. The Jazz had a raucous home court advantage at the Delta Center, known for its deafening crowd. That pressure increased for the Bulls when reports emerged that Michael Jordan was seriously ill, suffering from a high fever and body ache. According to the most popular version of events, Jordan had contracted a severe flu. Yet years later, his personal trainer Tim Grover would hint that Jordan might have had food poisoning from a suspicious pizza the night before. Whatever the true diagnosis, Jordan woke up that day in dreadful shape. Reports suggest that he could barely stand in his hotel room and even considered not suiting up. Such a scenario, however, clashed with his fiercely competitive spirit. Staying off the court for a crucial NBA Finals game did not sit well with him. When he appeared in the locker room, he was pale, cold sweating, and visibly fatigued. Teammates and staff members later recalled never having seen him so exhausted before a game had even started. The immediate concern was whether he could handle the grueling 48-minute while in such poor condition. Bulls medical staff kept a close eye on him, ready to pull him from the contest if necessary. But Jordan's determination was unwavering. It seemed that the pressure and adrenaline of the final triggered a newfound resolve to play through the pain. What followed was a performance that transcends sport altogether. As the game got underway, Jordan clearly wasn't his usual self. He missed some early shots and moved noticeably slower around the floor. Sensing his vulnerability, the Jazz looked to exploit it, pulling ahead by nearly 10 points in the first quarter. Karl Malone and John Stockton were thriving, and the crowd was in full voice. It looked like Utah might coast to victory, especially given how fatigued Jordan seemed. But as the game wore on, Jordan figured out how to ration what strength he had left. He began to pick his spots carefully and converted critical mid-range jumpers whenever he got a clean look. Even though he was clearly drained, Jordan refused to waste any chance to keep the score close. By the second quarter, the Jazz's initial lead started to shrink. Teammates like Scottie Pippen and Tony Kukoc tried to ease his burden, but everyone knew the Bulls ultimately needed Jordan to seal the deal. The once euphoric Delta Center crowd began to worry. Everyone realized that no lead was safe with Jordan on the court, no matter how ill he might appear. He was smart enough to conserve energy where he could, passing off some possessions and trying to avoid overly taxing himself on defense. Yet he never backed down from defensive assignments when it truly mattered. By halftime, the Bulls had closed the gap enough to stay well within striking distance, fueling Jordan's confidence that a comeback was possible. The third quarter saw Chicago start to claw its way back. Even though Jordan was dizzy and covered in sweat, he refused to back down. He attacked defenders off the dribble, rattled off contested mid-range jump shots, and provided the vital spark the Bulls desperately needed. Each time he scored, the boisterous Utah crowd fell a little quieter. They were used to seeing visiting teams crumble in Salt Lake City's high altitude, but this night was different. The emotional currents were palpable. The more they realized how sick Jordan was, the more painful each of his baskets became for the Jazz faithful. Then came the fourth quarter, a high-stakes battle for both sides. Malone continued scoring inside, finishing pick-and-rolls with Stockton. Meanwhile, Jordan required frequent breaks to catch his breath, gulp water, and often collapse onto the bench during timeout. Still, in the crucial moment, he demanded the ball. The highlight of the game was a pivotal three-pointer he buried late in the fourth, putting the Bulls ahead and momentarily silencing the arena. On the TV replay, you could see him pumping his fist lightly in celebration, only to bend over shortly after, every ounce of energy spent on that single play. The final seconds were a nail-biter. With the Bulls clinging to a slim lead, the Jazz needed just one or two clutch plays to steal the victory. Stockton missed a key three-point attempt, Malone got locked down defensively, and Utah's final chance slipped away. Chicago closed the game with a 90-88 win, making the series 3-2 in the Bulls' favor. Once the buzzer sounded, Jordan could barely stand. He leaned on Scottie Pippen as they left the court, a moment captured by cameras everywhere. That image would become one of the most iconic in NBA history, illustrating the sheer will it took for him to triumph. Jordan's final stat line was a remarkable 38 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals in 44 minutes, already impressive under normal conditions, borderline unbelievable for someone battling severe illness. The night further elevated his legend. With 4 rings to his name, a chest full of MVP trophies, and a reputation as a peerless competitor, this performance was yet another example of his unmatched drive. The next day, sports media around the globe led with Jordan's heroic display, portraying him as nearly superhuman. Even casual fans were stunned by how he repeatedly fought through fever and fatigue to take control of a must-win finals game. That victory led to Chicago reclaiming home court. They would seal the championship in Game 6 back in Chicago, capturing their 5th title. In 1998, they would go on to win a 6th. But for many, the 1997 triumph was forever defined by the flu game. The image of Jordan sagging into Pippen's arms at the end of the night became an enduring emblem of competitive spirit in pro sport. Over time, the details behind Jordan's malaise sparked plenty of debate and controversy. Years later, Tim Grover alleged that food poisoning was the likely culprit, pointing out that Jordan was the only person who ate the infamous pizza delivered to their hotel room in Utah. Grover also floated the possibility of foul play by whoever made or delivered that pizza, though no concrete evidence has ever emerged. Others maintain it was genuinely the flu, given Jordan's fever, nausea, and weak. But the true cause hardly matters. Nothing can take away from the magnitude of his feat. The flu game went on to influence generations of athletes and fans, cited as a prime example of dedication under adversity. It became a touchstone for mental and physical resilience. Jordan could have faded into the background or even sat out the game altogether. Nobody would have really blamed him if he had, considering the circumstance. But not only did he play, he dominated. He delivered in the closing moments of a crucial playoff match. It's a story that perfectly fits the narrative of an athlete who was as determined as he was talented, and it underscores why, for so many, Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time, not just for his accolade, but for his relentless mentality. Even decades later, the memory of Game 5 in 1997 remains a potent reminder of why the flu game occupies such a special place in basketball. It wasn't just about stats, final scores, or a narrow victory. It was a phenomenon fueled by raw emotion, psychological grit, and one man's refusal to surrender. Jordan, evidently far from his physical peak, decided he would not let the Utah Jazz take control of that final series, and he kept that promise, dragging the Chicago Bulls to a victory that has become forever emblematic of a champion's grit. Ultimately, the flu game endures in the public consciousness as one of the most riveting and inspiring sports stories of all time.